Hi, I'm Andrew, and welcome to the Scottish Basketball Podcast. Here, I'm going to chat the senior game with players, coaches, officials, and the back office. I'm going to find out more about their own experiences and what might motivate you to seek out your own, all to inspire and improve the state of the game at home. Access to the podcast episodes will always be free. Please consider contributing what you can when you can. Any contributions, however small and infrequent, are very helpful and always very much appreciated. Please enjoy today's episode with Donna Finnie talking about the 21-22 season.
Donna is a basketball coach from the city of Edinburgh. She was the first ever non-American head coach, male or female, in NCAA Division I basketball history. She guided the Houston Baptist, now Houston Christian Huskies for 12 seasons from 2013 to 2025. In 21-22, she took the team to their first regular season conference championship in school history and a first-round appearance in the National Invitational Tournament. I'm pleased to welcome Donna Finnie to talk about that season. Hello, Donna.
Hi, Andrew. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's the summer of 2021. You were heading into your 9th pre-season as head coach. You'd be looking to continue the positive momentum the team had built up from your first overall 500 season in 2021. At that time, how did you reflect on the 2021 season, and how did those reflections influence your preparations and plans for the season ahead?
Well, I think, it's very tough at the Division I level, being at a smaller school, to be sustainable in terms of winning. And a big piece of that for me was retention of players and retention of staff. And so, obviously we had a huge number of players return that year. But for me, the big thing was, I've got to make sure I hold on to my staff, because again, at that level, you have a lot of turnover, because people obviously want to use the lower Division I level to springboard to their next step. But I was super lucky at that time, because I had Becca Allison, another Scottish coach who was on my staff, and she'd been with me a long time. She was staying. Taylor Reid, who was with me, she decided to stay. And then I added an assistant coach who had actually just been a head coach for 5 or 6 years in our league. And I added Casey Cryer to the staff. So I felt like going into the season, I probably had all the pieces staff-wise that I needed. And then I added a graduate assistant who'd been a former player of ours, a former post player, Kennedy Collins. And so I really felt good about the balance that our staff gave us going into that year, and that we could address some of the issues that we'd had the previous year to improve our performance. But certainly with as many returners, I felt pretty confident going into that year that we could be contenders.
From the previous season, you returned 10 players, all with another year of experience, only losing one senior player. So you added 3 new players: Lauren Mapusua, who was a senior guard transfer from Central Arkansas, Elizabeth Matado, who was a freshman center, and Felicity Hilford, who was a freshman guard from Australia. What did you think that they were going to offer that was maybe different and beneficial to the team? And who of the returning players were you expecting to take a step up in the new season?
Yeah, so I think, with those new players, I just felt like we needed a point guard as a backup point guard, and that was Felicity. Her work ethic was very clear when we recruited her, and we knew that she would come in every day and work hard and push our other 2 point guards. And that was important for us, to bring in a younger player that was going to push them every day. Lauren was the one that we expected a lot from immediately, because she had a little bit more experience having played at the Division I level. Her toughness was crucial for us throughout the year, and I'll probably touch on that later about how important it was. But I just really loved her physicality. You don't see that as often now, and the way she attacked the rim reminded me so much of Rose Anderson, who I coached. And so I was a fan of Lauren before I even coached her, and I was really happy that we got her to sign with us that year. And then Liz, she's 6'4", almost 6'5", good body. And again, as a freshman coming in, I knew that she was going to push Marilyn and Abby, our starting posts, every day. And that's what we were looking for, was to make sure that we brought in people that were going to push our starters to get better and not just be content with being, your starting lineup. And we also brought in Amy Cotton that year, and Amy was one that we really had high hopes for. And again, her physicality at the 3-4 spot was huge for us. So I think just like bringing those new players in, we knew that our practices were going to be more intense and more competitive, and we needed that from the previous year, because I didn't want the ones that had played a lot of minutes feeling, oh, we're good, we're going to start again. And they needed that push, they needed that competition every day in practice, and we got that from that group.
Amazing. So you planned an 11-game non-conference schedule. You had matches against opponents including Texas Christian from the Big 12. You played New Mexico, who placed first in the Mountain West the previous year, as well as the usual mix of Div 3 and independent schools. What are you usually looking for from a non-conference schedule? And was that any different in 21-22? And do you think you were able to achieve the balance that you were looking for?
I mean, again, being at the lower level of Division 1, you're kind of required to play what they call guarantee games. So you can bring some money in for your program and your school. So playing those Big 12 teams is really, a revenue generator more than anything else. And yes, it's great to go and play the TCUs, the LSUs, etc., but you don't really get much from those games because there is such a gulf between the talent level, at the top of Division 1 to the bottom of Division 1, and particularly physicality. But I think that particular year we had a much bigger team than we'd ever had in terms of stature, and length as well. And so I found that, the physicality was less, there was less of a differential that year for us. And that was encouraging for us early in the season, because typically you go into those games, knowing the outcome, unfortunately, and really trying to find small things that you can get from them, whether it's, a change in your defense or being able to, run players off screens better or whatever it is. You try and find things in those games to take positives from them. But I think that particularly this year, we wanted to make sure that our non-conference schedule included some teams that on paper were just slightly better than us, and that we could prove that we could compete with. And I think we did a really good job of that with some of the teams that we scheduled in 21-22.
Yeah, so from non-conference play, you won 4 games all against the lower ranked opposition and lost 7 games against the similar or higher ranked oppositions. How did the results and performances make you feel ahead of conference play? And what adjustments did those games allow or force you to make in terms of maybe some planned rotations or the style of play?
Yeah, it's interesting because we accepted an invitation to go and play in a tournament in Arizona over Thanksgiving and played Montana and Grand Canyon. Both of those teams we knew were going to be top 2 in their respective leagues. And so we knew that, they were going to be challenging opponents, but our goal was, okay, we got to make sure we stay in these games and get those end of game experiences that we need for conference play, that we knew we were going to have to use in conference play. The Montana game, first off, I mean, I thought we played so tough in that game. They were extremely physical. That whole tournament was officiated very differently than what we see in Texas. And so it was a little bit rougher than the girls were used to. But we played really good team basketball that day, and we took the game to overtime. Ultimately, we lost, but we took so much from that game. But you have to turn around and then play again the next day. And we played against the Grand Canyon team who we knew were going to pick us up full court. We had played them the previous year. And, so we kind of felt like we knew what we were going to see from them. And again, we played a tight game and, weren't on the right end of it. But I came out of both of those games feeling really positive about where we were at. As a coach, it's important that you don't peak too soon, right? You don't want your team to be playing their best basketball in November, the end of November, because ultimately if that's happening, that come March, they're not going to be playing their best basketball. So for me, I liked the way we were heading. I felt like we were doing a better job of putting points on the board. That was one of the things we wanted to address from the previous season. And I think just like there were some things that in that period of time with that tournament, playing Texas State right after that, we knew Texas State were going to be the top of the Sun Belt. They ended up winning it that year. We played them to a 4-point game. I think it was interesting because at that point in non-conference, our starting lineup was different than it was when we went into conference play, because we did have, 7 or 8 people who could potentially be starters, and we were pushing each other every day. And so I felt good about where we were at. I knew that we still had areas that we had to improve upon, but going into those first early conference games, I felt like we were learning the lessons that we needed, and I'd hoped that they would transfer once we got into conference play.
So yeah, the team would return after Christmas and the conference season was set. You had a 14-game schedule, playing every other team once home and once away. Started with 3 games on the road, quite a short period of 7 days. 2 wins against McNeese State and UIW off big performances from Indesai Collins, and then a loss against TAMCC. What do you remember of those early conference games, and how did the group respond both as a team and as individuals to those results?
So I remember the game against McNeese, and they had a scorer who was a transfer into their program, and all the talk was about how she was going to be the best player in the conference that year and the leading scorer and all of this talk. And Tamia Jefferson, who ended up being, conference player of the year that year in our program, she said to me before the game, "Coach, I want to guard her." And I said, "Well, you can't give her an inch, because this girl can really shoot the ball." I mean, she was a big guard who, as soon as she crossed the half, you had to respect that she was going to shoot the ball if she was open. And Tamia just did an incredible job on her that game. I think the girl ended up with 4 points, if even that. And Tamia scored 29 or 30 points herself that game. Like, she was just incredible. That was kind of the breakthrough moment for Mia, because she'd had some games, but consistently hadn't been getting it done defensively. And that was my challenge to her, was like, you got to prove you can do it defensively, because, I knew that for us to win the league that year, it was going to come from our defense. And I needed to play her more minutes because she was such a good scorer, but defensively, she wasn't getting it done. And that was her moment of, I'm going to get it done. I think that was just such a turning point for her individually. But the biggest turning point for the team was right after that Corpus game. I don't think I've ever been as upset with a team as I was in that game, because I knew this team had talent, and I knew they could win the league, but they weren't playing hard enough, and they weren't doing the little things that it takes to win. Like, it's so hard to win a regular season, because you have to be at your best every single day, and they weren't doing those things. And despite knowing that we were a very good defensive team, we didn't take any charges that game. We weren't diving on the floor after loose balls. They were. We didn't do that. And that was just so, uncharacteristic for us. After the game, and this was not planned in any way, and looking back on it, I'm not really sure how it worked, or if it was why things worked. But I just got so angry at them, and, I wanted to express how much I believed in them, because I did. I believed that they could win this thing. But at the same time, how disappointed I was, because we weren't playing hard, because we were more concerned about the things that don't matter instead of the things that do matter. And as basketball players, like, during season and once you're in conference season, you got to focus, you got to lock in, and you got to forget all the things that are going on the outside. And so that day, I remember telling them, like, you guys care more about how you look than how you play. And that's going to change as of today. So we banned makeup, we banned the eyelash extensions, we banned the nails, and we also banned TikTok, because they were messing around doing TikToks before that game. And they were saying, no, we're focused. And they weren't. They came on the floor and they weren't focused. We went through the rest of that season and without any makeup, without any of that stuff. And we ended up leading the league in charges taken. And our post player, Abby Sutherland, at 6'4", was the leading charge taker in the league. And, we won because of our defense. Our defensive numbers were incredible that year. We were top 5% in the nation. They bought into it. Like, a lot of girls wouldn't buy into that, but they knew that I believed that they could win this, and in turn, they believed they could do it. So they had to sacrifice something. And if it was how they looked and, like, worrying about different things, then they were willing to do that. And they did it.
So yeah, the sort of middle stretch of the season was followed. You had 3 wins against the lowest 3 ranking teams, and who ended up at the 3 lowest ranked teams in the conference. And then it was your biggest loss of the season at home to Southeast Louisiana. Do you remember anything of that game? And at this point, do you remember what was the gap between yourselves and at this point the higher ranked teams like Southeast Louisiana and Corpus? And did you know what it was going to take to close that gap?
Yeah, I mean, the gap was definitely they had more offensive weapons than we did. That particular game against Southeastern, we did not defend the way that we should have. And I think that was disappointing, knowing that they were on a roll at that point. I think the difference was I'm very big on let your game do the talking. I don't believe in kind of putting it out there how great we are. We haven't won anything, we haven't done anything yet. Let's just get it done. They came in very confident, and I think there was a marked difference between their girls and ours. Like we were business-like, but their confidence was just sky high. And we that was a tough game for us, but we knew going into the next time we played them at their place that we could get them. And again, we didn't put it out on social media. We weren't talking our team up. It was, let's go and get this done. It was interesting because for us, when we won that game, then we went on this incredible run to finish off the season. And for them, that loss then sparked, I think, 3 or 4 straight losses for them, which they hadn't had all year. So it was an interesting turning point for us because it was almost like we needed that reality check of, hey, these guys are confident and we have to be our best every single day. And I was really pleased with how the girls responded after that game because, we got back to being tougher again and defensively getting it done. And, we were having our offensive struggles, but on the defensive end, we weren't giving people the looks that they were getting in other games. And ultimately, that's why we went on to win the regular season.
Slightly different words. Maybe you could have predicted what would have followed, but as you mentioned, you had 7 straight wins to close out the regular season. This included big wins against Southeastern Louisiana and Corpus, whom you moved ahead of in the rankings to finish as regular season champions for the first time in HBU's history. What did it take specifically in the final 2 games, which were just 4 days apart, that were needed to secure the title, and how did that follow into the celebrations that came after?
So it took those players that we talked about initially, the new players, the younger players, the freshmen coming in, it took them really stepping up. We relied so heavily on our starting lineup and our top kind of 7 players, and we really needed those others to step up just in practice and be ready to play in case we needed them. They did such a good job of that. I made sure that I kept emphasizing how important they were because I can't, looking back, we didn't have that any other year I was there, to where, the kids that weren't playing a lot were still practicing and competing as hard as the ones that were. And I truly think that is what makes a team great, when everybody's buying into the same common goal and working as hard as they can for the good of the team. I think that was something that particular year that was very obvious, that we didn't have egos on our team. We didn't have someone we had to have 20 points a game. It was, our team was a team. And going into those last 2 games, that we relied on that. I'll never forget, we played the last game at home against McNeese, and Lauren came off the bench and she hit a big 3, and then she got stealing a layup, and just those things at that point, because we were struggling offensively, were huge. And she was so ready, which is crazy because she never knew when her name was being called, but she was always ready to come off the bench and give us a spark, whether it was offensively or defensively. And so, that was great for me, seeing her being able to come out and contribute and help us close out those games. And obviously being at home when we won was great, and I think, it was nice for the girls to close that out and have their families there, the ones that were able to be there. But yeah, just a kind of surreal feeling. Like it was almost, I mean, I felt confident going into those last 2 games, but had never said it out loud that we were going to do it, again, because it's like you want to make sure you're getting things done before you say anything. Yeah, it just took a total team effort, and again, great staff effort as well, because I felt like we did such a good job on our scouts and in terms of being very specific with taking teams out of their actions defensively, and that really helped us to kind of close things out.
So after the regular season came to an end, you had the conference playoffs and a home semi-final against 4th ranked UIW. This, however, would be the team's second biggest loss of the season against the team that you had beaten home and away. Talk about game day, how it unfolded, and what was the difference this time round against UIW? What tactical adjustments, especially defensively, had they made to frustrate your own game plan?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because the way our conference tournament works, the top 2 seeds don't play until the semifinals. And so we actually had more than a week off between winning the league and then going into that tournament. And I think it can upset your rhythm a lot. You know, in the history of that league, when I coached in it, only one time did the number 1 seed go through to the NCAA tournament. There were so many upsets because the lower seeds would get on a roll and be able to kind of, you know, take momentum into the next game. And so you're a 1 or a 2 seed meeting this team who's hot in the semis. And it's hard when teams have that much confidence and they've been playing the previous 2 or 3 days. And we just happened to hit Incarnate Word when they were at their best. You know, they really were. And we had that week off, and it definitely was not any part of our girls taking them lightly because we never allowed that. But they came out and they sat in this zone that just, we couldn't hit a shot that day. Could not hit a shot. And it felt like we tried to get the ball inside more. We couldn't make layups. The ball was going around the rim and kind of circling the rim and falling off. And it was just, it was incredible. So they were playing very well, and we looked like we had been asleep for a week, which was not the case, but that's what it looked like. So it was really disappointing because I felt so good going into that tournament. Again, not thinking it was going to be easy in any way because our league is so tough and so competitive. But you know, just it was a weird game and disappointing. But knowing that we could play after that kind of made things a little bit easier in the locker room after that game.
Yeah, that result was quickly forgotten. I'm sure you had the small matter of the biggest game in the school's history to focus on, a matchup against Toledo in the National Invitational Tournament for the first time.
Yeah.
So as a head coach, you've got to prepare the team for this huge game, as well as take in and savour the atmosphere and occasion. What was the buzz around campus like in the build-up to that match? And how did the team respond to the focus and intensity around such a game?
So it was interesting because with the NIT, normally you play someone in your region, so you don't have to travel, you know, really on flights at all. For some reason, we got matched up against Toledo, who are one of the best mid-majors in the country, and you only have 2 days notice. Like, so basically they announced the field, you're matched with your competitor, and then you're playing 2 days later. So I'll never forget, we were sat in the office just waiting and waiting to see who we'd get matched up to. And we'd kind of already had a plan of like, okay, when they announce that she's going to do personnel, she's going to do offense, she's going to do defense, you know, blah, blah, blah. So we kind of all heard Toledo and we looked at each other like, what? Not expected at all. And we sat there the rest of that evening and put together the scout because we had to do it quickly. It was interesting because we had not really seen a team like them who were as good in transition for a long time. And so we also had to think about what do we have to change? Do we have to make an adjustment slightly? And I remember thinking that the year before we had put in a 2-2-1 kind of delay kind of pressure, and it had worked really well against the team that were good in transition. And so we kind of pulled up some of that stuff and looked at, you know, personnel wise, who to put where. And so we had 2 days to prepare for that, which was interesting. And then we flew up to Toledo. So, you know, people were excited, but it all happened so quickly. The girls were excited because obviously it's postseason basketball and that's a big deal. But yeah, it happened so quickly. You know, it almost seems like a blur. And then we were there, you know, which was pretty cool. So, and when we got there, obviously they, you know, they're such a good program and they have great facilities, and we knew it was going to be a big crowd, and, you know, preparing the girls for that, you know, was difficult again because of the quick turnaround, but there's such excitement when you're playing postseason. So it was definitely a great experience for everybody involved. Yeah.
The game itself, by way of summary, the team found themselves in a relatively sizable quarter one deficit, including 5 minutes without scoring a field goal. You mounted a big second quarter comeback, You've reduced the deficit back to 7 within the first 2.5 minutes of the second quarter, back to 2 with less than 2 minutes to go in the first half. Toledo did mount a late charge to lead by 7 at half-time. It was a close second half. You got it back to 5 at one point, and the final deficit finished at 10. What do you remember of your role as head coach in that game? How did you try to lead the team through that initial adversity? And then how does it change that when you're back in control of the game?
Yeah, it was kind of a weird day for me because my grandmother actually passed that morning. And so it was kind of like this. I think I went into the game kind of feeling like in a bit of a daze in a way. And we certainly started the game not the way that I would have liked. And we let them run at us too early. And I remember calling a timeout and talking about why we needed to get back into that 2-2-1 to slow them down and what the objective of that was, because we were in it, but we were much too aggressive in it. And it was allowing them to get past our front line and just open up driving lanes behind. And so once we settled down and got back to that, it definitely, we were competing play by play. Everything was tight. They had a couple of post players that were really, really good, big, strong post players. But, you know, the way that we played our defense, we took everything out the middle of the floor. And so anytime they were forced to the baseline, they were coming into either Marilyn or Abby, who at 6'3" and 6'4" and long, can really change shots. And, you know, they did such a good job of rotating across to help. Liz Matari came off the bench in that game, and she gave us an instant spark offensively, which we really needed, but also defensively was big and strong. And so we were able to hang around in the game because I think our length and our size really bothered them, but also because we stopped them running at us. That was such a key for that game. But ultimately, you know, we weren't able to score enough points. I think we had some really good looks in the fourth quarter, and we just couldn't put the ball in the basket. Kind of carried on from that Incarnate Word game, unfortunately. And although we did a great job defensively on Toledo after that first couple of minutes, we just couldn't pull it back. But, you know, it was one of those games where I felt like we had it. I kept thinking like we were pulling closer. I was confident. Every time out was positive. Like, you know, this is what we need to do in this next 2 or 3 minute stretch here. The ball just wasn't falling for us, and I remember after the game feeling really proud of how they had competed, because it was a very loud arena that they play in, packed, and there obviously were, I can't remember exactly, but I know they had over 20 wins at that point, and you know, it had a great season and very, very strong program. You know, it was an interesting day for us because obviously, you know, first time we've played postseason, true postseason. And I think like knowing that we were going to get a lot of those players back, it was almost like we've got another chance, you know? So again, it wasn't like this feeling of like it's final at the end of it. But yeah, just a kind of, we could have had that one to a certain extent. But definitely a great experience and great group to work with, you know, just defensively, particularly, just a really, really good group to work with. And we had all the pieces and all the length. And there, you know, from a coaching standpoint, having what we had that year is so rare. You need so many things to go right for you. You need to stay out of injury trouble, which we did on the whole. We had a couple in the non-conference that kind of, you know, we missed a few people for a few weeks, but you know, during conference play, we got very lucky that we didn't have any major injuries to our starters. And so I think on reflection, things just went our way to a certain extent, but we had to get these girls locked in, and when they chose to be at their best, you know, good things happened. So
with that, the 2021-22 season, it was the school's most successful season ever. It could argue it was your most successful season ever. You led the team to that success, as well as achieving your 100th win as a head coach. At the time, were you able to appreciate the success that you'd personally achieved? And did it change your outlook on yourself as a head coach for the seasons ahead?
No and no. I think when you're in it, it's really hard to think about anything except the next game. And that was our kind of mantra all year, was next game, next play, next game. You're not thinking about what you've achieved. You're not thinking about, and I really think that helped us. I go back to that Southeastern game, like that mentality helped us because all we were thinking about was the next play, the next game. And we weren't getting too far ahead of ourselves. I think to a certain extent, some of the other teams in our league were getting ahead of themselves when they were on win streaks. We didn't think like that. We were very much a next play, next game type team. And I think that bleeds over into, you're not celebrating successes. Like the 100 win thing was just like, I wasn't even thinking about it. It wasn't a thing like, oh, this is a big deal. And the girls kind of did something in the locker room afterwards, but it wasn't something I really cared about, because it's like, it's part of the journey for the team. Our goal, like, what's our team goal? We got to reach that. That's the focus right now. And so, yeah, I think it, certainly is nice when you reach those milestones, but you would trade all of that for team success, no doubt. So it was definitely a great season to go through with this group. But like I say, it's really hard to do that at the Division 1 level, the lower level. You don't have the resources, you're not able to recruit deep rosters because you just don't have the things in place that you need to do that. And so for us, like, this group was really special, and I'm glad they came out of it with the regular season at least. And I know they all wanted the NCAA tournament, but they should be proud of what they did, because it is a huge achievement to be the first team sport at HCU as well to get to win a regular season championship. And just, a really good group of kids that came together and did something great.
Donna, thank you for your time.
Of course.